Hey guys, Stuart Trier here from Marketing Cheat Guides. Today I have on the show Jarod Spiewak, founder and lead strategist of Blue Dog Media. Jarod, thanks for joining us today on the show. And why don't you tell the audience just a little bit about yourself and your background?
Yeah, of course. Happy to be here. So, as you said, my name's Jarod. I currently run an agency. My background is that I freelanced for many years, about 6-7 years, worked in-house at the time as well. So I got a lot of experience hands-on with agencies. I was the lead SEO strategist for a law firm marketing agency. At the same time, I was still freelancing, did a lot of white label work, which gave me a lot more experience with agencies. And eventually I just had a big enough of a client base that it just made sense for me to start lowering my hours to part-time and then eventually to no time. And then I was like, great, I have all these clients. What am I doing now? Starting an agency just seems to be the next step. So at the start, we were just doing SEO, and now we're doing SEO and Google Ads PPC management.
Nice. And so have you stayed within that niche? Are you mostly focused in the law space, or do you work with a variety of different niches?
So mostly with lawyers. Not at first, it wasn't really intentional. A lot more now, so it's intentional. It's just that when lawyers came to me, I was able to get on a phone call, talk with them about case values, depositions, bar regulations, which is very important if you're doing any marketing for lawyers. There's certain things you can and cannot say, and it depends on the state, at least within the US. And so just being able to get on the phone with these types of people and being able to talk with them about their businesses pretty in depth, and just knowing how to talk with these people. People tend to be either I love working with law firms or I hate working with law firms. And I tend to be on the I like working with law firm side of things. So it just kind of naturally progressed to being a bigger and bigger portion of my client base. So now I prefer to work with law firms just because it's easier to handle. I work very well with them, but it's about 65% of the client base, but it's all service-based professional businesses. So contractors, accountants, and that sort of stuff.
Interesting. Okay, so you got into this because you had a certain level of experience, I guess, working with lawyers. When you started to transition into your own operation, how did you go about capturing their attention? So one of the big things I hear from marketers is, how do you get lawyers on the phone? They make money when they're selling their time, and so how do you go about having them find you and or get on a call with you?
Yeah, so it's a little bit funny. Is one of the greatest sources of customers for me is actually one of the places that everyone vitriolly hates, and that's Upwork, which is funny to think about, but it's actually been historically great. It's actually where I first started when I was freelancing, albeit a couple other things before that didn't really work out. But I started on there, and I have a very good profile on there. So it just, over time, people come to me whenever someone invites me to something or whatever. I see law firm in there, I jump on that. And then I'm able to just respond with that. Here's my portfolio of all this legal work that I've done, and no one else can really compete with that probably on that platform. So it's very easy for me to just be like, here's case studies, here's details, here's stuff I've written about legal, here's guest posts that I've done, here's podcasts that I've been on talking about this. Let's get on a call. And then they just schedule on my calendar. The rest is history. From there, I do get some legal referrals just from shows that I've been on like this, where people are like, oh man, you work with a lot of law firms. I just had a law firm come to me. Doesn't seem like it's a right fit for me. Maybe it's a right fit for you. And I'll get on that call, or I'll have people that have seen these sorts of shows that are law firms themselves or work in law firms that then reach out to me there. But those are mainly the two ways. I wouldn't recommend if you're trying to get law firms on board, trying to cold email or cold call, because it's just like, if you've probably heard this on medical law, you're going to get a gatekeeper, right? They have front desk people from day one. That's just generally how those types of firms work. And when you charge people $300 to $400 an hour, you really don't want to spend half an hour with the phone on the phone with some stranger when you're getting 20 different emails a day from people that want to get you on the phone.
Awesome. So SEO being a time dependent thing, it takes time to start building traction. What are some of the horror stories you've seen coming into law firms of, let's say, less talented SEOs in terms of helping them? What are some things that you've seen, and what are some of the steps that you typically take that help turn that around? And I'd love to hear kind of those.
Yes, this is always a fun one. The first thing I look for with legal is to see if there's anything that's violating the bar regulations on their website. Now, typically what I find is, because lawyers are very busy people by default, there's case, depending on the type of law firm, it's very intensive for the lawyer themselves. So they they're not really paying attention to the changes that you make on their website. When you send them over stuff for approval, unless it's content, it's just, yep, it's approved. Yeah, this is all technical. I don't have the time to look at it, unless they have an in-house marketing person that can be a little bit different. But they're not really paying attention to the work that you're doing in detail. So I'm looking to see if the person that was working with this law firm doesn't understand legal marketing. So I'm looking at, is there anything that's violating the bar? You can't make claims that you're the number one or that you're the best, right? So things like that, it can't be something that can't be substantiated, if you will. Mm-hmm. So when I see right in the title tag, number one best car accident lawyer in Philadelphia or whatever it is, right? That's a big issue. Screenshot that, send it over to the lawyer, because that can actually get them disbarred. I've worked with a law firm before. This was when I was working in-house in an agency where one of their partners actually done something that got them in a lot of trouble with the bar, and all the lawyers in the firm were threatened with disbarment for violating these bar regulations around advertising. So it's very important to be compliant. So that's one of the things I look for. The next thing I look for is the actual content quality, not in terms of SEO, but in terms of, does this make sense in terms of what they're talking about with legal? Are they trying to rank one page for automobile accidents, and they have motorcycles, car, and truck, and all this kind of stuff on one page, where if you've really worked in legal before, at least personal injury, you would know that those would be separate pages. So that'd be a very quick, 2-minute thing that I would check for. And then just the normal kind of SEO stuff. Sometimes lawyers will throw around a lot of big money, because it's a big money, it's a competitive space. And so a lot of the times, marketers aren't necessarily, especially people that are newer, aren't used to working with larger budgets. They're just getting started. They're really excited. They got this client that has a very large budget, and now they don't know what to do with it. So then I just look for stuff that doesn't make sense, stuff that looks like busy work. Sometimes it'll be great. They were creating a ton of content. It's very poor quality content. There's a lot of duplicate content. There's a lot of cannibalization issues. They were trying to get one off on this client by, they just took the same exact content and they copy and pasted on 50 different pages, including blog posts. So you throw the site into SiteLiner, which checks for duplicate content. Sometimes the entire site is just lighting up. So I would say at first, looking specifically for legal stuff doesn't take very long. And then after that, just the general kind of SEO shenanigans that you'll get into when people aren't doing things as they should be.
Awesome. So I know you mentioned when we were just starting this that you like automation. What type of automations would you be bringing to clients that you'd be willing to disclose from your tactics?
Yeah, sure. So I would say I'm a very lazy person. If something takes more than 5 minutes of my time, I try to automate it. Because there's just, why do you work when you don't have to do work, right? So if someone wants to Google this, feel free. If you look up Jarod Spiewak, SEO Spotlight for Matt Diggity, I go in detail a couple of automations I did there. If you go to teambluedog.com, keyword research, I have a keyword research sheet that you can just download it. It's public. So if you want to jump into that, and I've talked about a couple other places as well. But to get into detail as to some of the automations, is one of them is something that's very common, especially working in local, is citations, right? Citation building, you're typically not doing that in-house. It's typically a VA or someone that's a freelancer, or you're working with a vendor that will you order citations for a business, you get a list back of URLs. Well, once you get those citations back, what you need to do is make sure that they were done correctly. Well, what's the anchor text being used, right? You don't want a bunch of citation sites with exact match anchor text. You don't want to get a bunch of citations pointing to the wrong URL. Well, if you have 30 to 50 citations, it can take a while to actually go through all those. So what I thought was Screaming Frog will actually handle these checks for you. So if you go into list mode on Screaming Frog, if you don't know Screaming Frog, it's not going to make a whole lot of sense. But I think most people will probably be familiar with it at the very least. And I think you should be able to do this with a free version, not 100% sure. Go into list mode and you just paste in specific URLs that you want to check. You want to make sure JavaScript rendering is off, otherwise it's going to screw it up. Then you just crawl those, let's say those 50 URLs. Then what you do is you export all outlinks. And what happens is this exports every link, internal and outbound, on that page. Then what I did was I built a sheet that all I had to do is import that export file into sheet 1, and then sheet 2, I indicate the URL of the client's business. Then it just crawls the sheet, checks, okay, what links actually go to this website, and then it pulls over the anchor text and the page on the site that it's going to. And then it also has a safety sheet, if you will, where it goes, okay, you imported 50 unique domains that we were checking for citations. We found links on 30 of them or 45 of them, typically pretty high. So this other sheet goes, these are the 5 specific ones that we couldn't find links for. And that could be because it's a citation site that doesn't have links, or it doesn't actually make it an href, or it could be that it was rendered through JavaScript. So it was like a button, and just because JavaScript was off, which you want it to be off, otherwise it's going to screw it up. You just couldn't do that. And then you only need your VA or yourself or whoever does that to check 5 citations manually instead of 50. So the entire process takes, maybe 2-3 minutes rather than 10-15 minutes. And pretty much that's a more simple one, but everything and anything I try to automate. We do everything through Google Drive. So I have a folder structure within Google Drive that's like client name is the folder structure, then you go in that, and then you have a file, then you have 2 more folders. You go into each of those folders. There's like 3 more and a bunch of different files. So in total, there's like 50 to 75 different folders plus files. And I have a script that I just click a button, wait about 5 minutes, and it's completely duplicated, and everything's renamed to how I want it to be renamed.
Awesome. So do you program this yourself, or you outsource this to a VA?
So before I actually got into SEO, I thought I would get into programming first. I was teaching myself a lot of it. So I find it very therapeutic to do. I find it very enjoyable to do. For stuff that's easier, I'll do it myself. For other stuff, I'll just hire a developer, because stuff that'll take me a weekend, I can pay someone $50 to have it done in an hour. So it really depends. The folder structure and the citation when I built myself. The folder one I just got on Stack Overflow, which if anyone is into development at all, you'll know it's a great resource that'll give you pretty much whatever you want. Just Google what you want to do, and someone has written out how to do it. So for the duplicating the folder structure, I just Googled like duplicate folder structure script Google Drive or something like that, and I found a script to do it for me. So sometimes it's already out there.
You set it up once, and then you're just running that script, and it duplicates it for you. So every time you get a new client, you get that whole structure set up for you right from the start.
Right. Awesome. The only thing I need to input is the actual URL of the folder. So we have different folder structures depending on different types of clients. So I just copy and paste what type of client into it because I have it saved in that sheet. Press the button, and then duplicates.
Awesome. That's a great hack. So if you were recommending to a newer agency, so somebody coming up, what are some things that you've kind of learned in your journey now in terms of being able to, make the transition from either employee to freelancer and then building a business? Some things most people seem to struggle with is landing those first few clients. So any tips or tricks on what you would recommend for somebody a little bit earlier in the journey to growing their business?
So when it comes to clients, and I think that once you get the hang of it, once you get those initial clients, once you find what works for you, it tends to be a very low priority thing to actually growing a business. Very little of actually having the business is actually the fulfillment and sales part of it. It's the other stuff that really kills you in the end, which I'll talk about in a second. But when it comes to getting the first couple clients, what I would recommend is just do what works for you first and foremost. If you're not a natural salesperson, you're probably not going to do very well cold calling. Right? You're probably not going to do very well door knocking. If you're not good at talking, you're not going to do very well probably going to meetup spaces. Now that's something you want to get better at. Sure, go ahead and do it. But you don't want to read articles that are like, yeah, here's exactly how I made $10 million last year through cold emailing. But if you don't have any copy skills, if you don't have any automation or system skills, which if you're doing any of that scale you really need to have, that's going to be very hard and time consuming for you to do. But if you're completely comfortable with just picking up the phone and being like, hey, do you need my services? Then you should do that 8 hours a day until you have clients, right? So first, do what works for you. Sure, play around with a couple things. But once you find something that actually starts to gain you some traction, double down on that. You don't need a bunch of channels, right? One channel can make you 6, 7, 8 figures a year, depending on if that's what you do and depending on the channel. Right. So if you want to go to meetup groups and that's working for you, double down on that, right? If you're doing 1 a week, do 3, 4, 5 a week, every single day. If you have time, go to one. What you don't want to do is go, okay, great. I got a couple clients from doing a meetup group. Now I'm going to learn how to do cold emailing. Now I'm going to start doing content marketing. Now I'm going to start doing webinars. It's just way too much. So find what works for you based on your personality, based on your skill set, figure out how it's going to work. It's going to take time. You're very unlikely to get lucky with it at the start and be able to, your first cold email isn't going to land you a client, right? Your first meetup event, you're probably not going to get a client. But if you actually focus on how to improve your skills on that, you really double down on doing that, then it's going to be an amazing source and channel for getting clients. And it's going to be very easy and very natural for you to get more from it rather than being a very painful process if you're trying to master, 10 different acquisition channels at once.
Okay, perfect. So find what works for you and ride that momentum and definitely align it with your natural tendencies rather than trying to step out of your comfort zone. That makes a ton of sense. So what are some of the other challenges as you've kind of grown your business that you've ran into, and maybe people can learn from vicariously through your experience what to avoid or how to solve these problems?
Yeah, sure. So I actually wrote these down because I have three particular ones that I felt as though were things that I didn't feel anyone was really talking about when I kind of started. I hung out a lot in the Facebook groups, probably what a lot of people are doing. They're hanging out in the various Facebook groups. They're trying to learn the skills. I felt as though those are great resources for learning sales, for learning how to get clients, for learning how to fulfill on those services. But as things started to grow, there were certain things that were just really dragging things down. So first, overhead will kill you. I've become a very big proponent of minimizing overhead. And what that means, just basically any recurring expense. Probably the biggest mistake I've made was I got an office space. I actually hit $8K a month, right? What everyone wants to do. And the first thing I did was I got an office space. It was a great deal, $900 a month for about 2,500 square feet, which is very, very large. It was just because it was at like garden level. So it's kind of like half underground. It was very cheap for the square footage. So it's this nice big ego statement of now I have this massive office, and $8K a month really in terms of business really isn't that much. Yes, you can be able to quit your job at that level, whatever you want to do. There's a lot of things you can do with that, but it's really not that much money. So a big mistake there, because over time, as the rent increased, it was a 3-year lease. Now I'm paying about $1,300 a month. The lease is this is the final month of the lease. So in a week and a half, I'm finally out of that. But I never really needed that. I could have stayed working from home. I was actually living with my parents at the time. So I was like, okay, I'll get an office space. Now I actually have my own workspace. It would have just made more sense to be like, okay, great. I'll just take that money and get an apartment, right? So that's what I do now. This is just a home office in my apartment. This works for me. It doesn't cost me anything extra. And, as of next month, that's an extra $1,300 in overhead that I can put towards marketing, that I can put towards salary increase, that I could put towards hiring someone, that I could put towards whatever I want, because it's just unneeded. I also just recently had a CRM. Loved it, right? It was a great CRM, helped me a lot. My phone system was through it, about $80 a month. Got rid of that, found a different phone system, $30 a month. So saving $50 a month. Doesn't sound like a lot, depending on where you are, but over time, just you do that for 10, 15 different things, and now you're paying a couple $100 less, a couple $1,000 less per month, and you can put that towards whatever you want. So anytime now that I am buying something that's going to cause me more overhead, I'm taking a lot more time to think about it, even if it's a small purchase that's like $5 a month, right? It sounds kind of ridiculous to be worrying about a $5 a month expense, but it's very easy to go, okay, great, $5, that's nothing. So 10 things that are $5 are nothing either. And now you have a $50 a month expense for stuff that you don't necessarily need. So overhead will kill you. Really question that. You don't take on unnecessary expenses too early on. I would say that's probably one of my biggest mistakes is I would take on a lot of expenses that I didn't really truly need. Next would be mastering cash flow. Agencies are amazing cash flow businesses, right? It's get on a call with someone, maybe they're a $5,000 a month client. If they're a good client, you send the invoice, they pay it instantly. Great, you just made $5,000 for 20 minutes on the phone. Granted, I actually had to do work, but you can make a lot of money very quickly compared to if you were doing other sorts of businesses like SaaS. It's a whole different scheme, but with agency work, cash flow is very important. So something that I did recently, in a great book for this, is actually Profit First by, I don't have it next to me anymore. Yeah, something like that. But yeah, so Profit First, great book. I don't follow exactly what he says in it, but I used a lot of the principles, and I redesigned my cash flow processes towards the end of, actually, it was just happened to be in December when I finished the book. So it was perfect for the new year.
Nice.
Timing just kind of worked out. So I didn't follow everything in his book just because his whole thing was keeping it simple, but also being able to see things very easily. And I felt as though his processes were too complex, to be honest. So I just found something that I just wrote it down on a whiteboard here so it makes sense to me. So now when money comes into the business, it gets distributed in very specific ways into very specific accounts. And those accounts, how money goes in or out of those accounts is also very specific. So it may sound great to be like, hey, great, I have 30, 50, 100 grand or whatever it may be in the bank. Great, you can do all sorts of things with that, but that's not really realistic perspective of the business, right? What happens if you lose all your clients tomorrow? What's your runway before you have to go out of business? So you have to take a loan because you don't have any clients anymore. You need to get those clients. So, okay, great. Now I have a reserve. My reserve account is, if all my clients leave me today, I'm good for 6 months. So I can build that up. I can change, what I'm doing. I can completely change industries, completely change what the business does, and I'd be fine for the next 6 months, right? So just cash flow, recommend reading the book. I'm not an expert in it, but what it has done for me is I was like, great, I can make some big moves early on in 2020 because of the cash that I have at the bank. I've refocused where that cash should be placed in those accounts. And I was like, don't have as much money as I thought that I can actually play with because I need to have this money saved for this. This is what I have for taxes and all that kind of good stuff. So I'd really recommend reading that and understanding just because you have money doesn't mean you have money to spend. And finally, which I'll go quick on because I spend a lot of time on this, is automation is everything. Whether you're doing it yourself or you're hiring someone for it, if you can find a process that you can write it down step by step how to do it, which is what a lot of people do with their VAs, here's step by step what you need to do. You can automate it. That's the same way that computers work. You just tell them. It can be a lot more complex with that, especially machine learning, AI, and all that kind of stuff. But in a very simplistic format, if you can say step by step, here's how to do something, it can 100% be automated. So for that, work with a developer. Python is great. You don't even need to know Python. Just look for a Python developer, tell them what you want to do, and it'll get done, right? So look at what you can automate. SEO is very time consuming. Especially if you're starting out, you're probably not working with massive budgets. So the more you can stretch that budget by taking something that used to take you 4 hours and make it take you 4 minutes, that's very powerful.
Awesome. So you mentioned one that you've automated. Can you give an example that somebody that's, maybe a smaller budget than a lawyer, that they potentially could look at just so they can start to wrap their head around the type of things that you would be looking at automating?
Sure. So one of the scrapers are great. So that's one thing that I'd be looking at. So Screaming Frog is technically an automation tool because you could do everything that crawls manually and it does that automatically. But the first things that I tell people to automate, regardless of budgets or anything like that, is anything you do with Google Sheets or spreadsheets. I typically prefer Sheets. I'm great at Sheets. I can't really get a grasp on Excel for some reason. The buttons are just a little bit different, so I can't do it. But with Sheets, you're probably doing a lot of repeated work. So everything you do should have a template file. Any data parsing that you're doing, that's the first thing you should be automating. You should learn how to use the VLOOKUP in the query functions and array formula. That'll save you a ton of time. VLOOKUP and array formula are pretty easy to use, especially if you know the shortcuts, which is like I'm on a Mac, so like Command Shift Enter, and it automatically wraps the entire equation in array formula, so you don't even have to type it out. Query can take a little bit of time to learn. If you understand SQL, it's very similar. But that can help you with more complex data parsing. But basically, anytime someone comes in and let's say you export a file from Ahrefs, right? New client comes in, assuming you're doing SEO, you want to look at their backlink profile. And let's say through their backlink profile, you want to look at anything that has a DR of 40 plus, right? For whatever reason. Well, what you would want to do is you would want to have a sheet where all you have to do is export from Ahrefs, import to that sheet, and everything's already done for you. The way to do that is sheet 1 is just called your import sheet. Mm-hmm. Sheet 2 is whatever you want to call it. It's your parsing sheet. And what you have your functions there. The way that I would do it is go, okay, query, grab these specific rows or columns anytime that this column, whatever column is DR, is above 40. You could also do it with various other functions in different ways, but query would really be the most straightforward way to do it. And once you have that, once you've built it once, now all you have to do, you get a new client, copy and paste, or use the script that I mentioned to copy and paste your entire folder structure. And all you have to do now is export Ahrefs, import, and it's done. What this also does for you is it minimizes errors, right? Let's say you're doing something or a VA is doing something. Every step of the way that someone has to manually do something is a step that someone could mess up, either intentionally, unintentionally. They weren't paying attention. They're supposed to click button A, they click button B, right? They were supposed to choose on Ahrefs prefix, they chose domain, so now they're getting a lot more data than they expected, right? So there's a lot of things that can go wrong. If you take something from 40 steps to 3 steps, there's a lot less that can actually go wrong. It's going to be much more consistent and much faster. So if someone's looking to automate anything, I would say start with anything that you do in spreadsheets, start with those 3 functions that I mentioned, and anything that you do on a repeated basis, you should have a templated file for it, and you're going to have an import sheet. If it's more complicated, you might need a helper sheet, which is where you can't go from A to B. So you have to go from A to C to B to be able to get what you need to be done. But yeah, I would start with those 3 functions, and you'll probably find a lot that you're doing that you can kind of automate with that.
Perfect. Question about tools. So what tools do you use that you would recommend taking a look at? Any that are, obviously you mentioned Ahrefs. What else do you find yourself using on a regular basis?
Yeah, sure. So a lot is stuff that we've built, whether through using APIs of sites that have APIs, but in terms of tools that most people would want to use, Screaming Frog and Ahrefs are the main two. I'm trying to think that's mainly, so Backup Buddy is a WordPress plugin. Any client that comes on board, we just have a backup you want to do basically for revision management. Before you make changes on a website, you want to make sure that if you screw something up, you can just click a button and go back. You don't want to break a website. So that's great, especially for if clients have the tendency to go in and break things themselves. You click a button and it's fine. But yeah, I would say in terms of like SEO tools, those are really the main two. I can look here, but I really don't think there's much else that we're doing besides stuff that we built. Like I said, I try to keep the overall overheads low. Actually, here's a couple things. Glad I actually opened this file. I have a file with everything. So one is Calendly. I use that for any scheduling. So anyone can really use that. There's a free version. I think I'm on the paid version just because I have a number of calendars. And if you have like more than one or two, I think you need to have the paid version, but you can be fine on the free version. Screaming Frog, Supermetrics Data Studio connector. So Data Studio is what I use for reporting. It's free. It's easy. It pulls in APIs from a lot of different sources. It's a data visualization tool. Google My Business, or the Map Pack, doesn't really have a very good interface for data. If you actually log into Google My Business Insights, it has like nothing. So what this does is it actually pulls in the API data, so you can actually visualize anything in the ways that you want to. It just makes it easier. Eventually, I'm sure we'll just build our own API, but it's like $300 a year for this, so it just makes sense. Unbounce for any landing page design on the PPC side of things, we use that. And Local Viking is something if you're doing local SEO. What it does for us is it mostly for GeoGrid rank tracking. There's only a couple of tools that do this on the market right now in terms of price, in terms of features. I felt this one was the best. But basically, if you're not familiar with Google Maps, wherever you search from isn't really where you rank. It's actually in a grid. So depending on how far you are, you can have different rankings. So it just is a different, much better form of rank tracking for local. And That's pretty much it.
Awesome. So before I let you go, what's something you spent $250 or less on that doesn't need to be business related that you're enjoying?
Yeah, sure. So I'll give you a real answer, and then I'll give you also a real answer, but kind of cheating at the answer. Okay. So first would be these. These are the Bose Quiet Comfort 35-2, I believe. Great pair of noise cancellation headphones. For some reason, it's talking to me right now. Actually, can you still hear me? I might have actually screwed up the, okay.
No, I still hear it.
Oh, I changed it where it's coming out of here. Let me just go through this 1 second. Okay, can you talk?
Yeah.
Okay, sorry. When I picked it up, it changed where the audio was coming out to the headphones, and I'm not wearing those right now. So those, I think those were about $250, but I had another pair that are just falling apart that weren't Bluetooth from Bose. So these are really great. I wear them pretty much all day, every day. And then for my cheating answer is, and I'm not a financial advisor, so I don't recommend anyone do this. This is just what I do. But all my business credit cards, all my credit cards are reward credit cards. So I get between 1% to 2% back on all purchases. And everything that I don't get absorbed a crazy amount of fees for putting on my credit cards, I then put on my credit card. So some places charge like 25% more for a credit card. So anything I pay for in the business gets on the credit card. And then because I pay it all off right away, I don't get any fees for that. So I just get the 1.5% back is what I think the business cards do. So I put, let's say, 10 grand on the account in a month for just normal cash flow business expenses, just stuff that I'm spending on client work that has to get done. Yep. Then that's at 1%, that's $100 in free money. And then what I do is I use that to buy anything that's kind of non-necessity. So any business books that I buy, I don't actually have to pay for. I think I have about 50 to 100 books. I think I paid about $20 total for all those. I'm using a sit-stand desk right now. That I just bought around Christmas. This was like $350 retail. I think I spent less than $100 on it because I just had the points accumulated. So that's been really good for non-necessity purchases where I don't have to actually think about, is this really worth buying? Is this cool? I don't actually have to pay for it a lot of the times. So that's my cheating answer.
Perfect. Well, thanks so much for taking the time. Where can we let people know to go reach out if they want to learn more or see more? Where's the best place to send them online?
Yeah, sure. So first, I have nothing to sell you. I don't sell anything to marketers. So if you want to check out my personal site, jarodspiewak.com, the content that I'm putting out there is I've recently started doing affiliate marketing. So I have 3 or 4 flip reports, basically, which is what I'm calling them. And it's just me going through my journey of affiliate marketing. It's very kind of not necessarily step-by-step, but here's all the things that I screwed up. Here's everything that's going right. It's P&L. So here's exactly what it made. Here's exactly what the expenses are. If you go to any of those, I think if you go to the Learn page, it'll have a box if you want to sign up for the mailing list. And if you, on my website, you go to the Learn page, I actually have a link there that goes through every other show that I've been on, all the guest posts I've done, all the podcasts I've been on. So if you want to see me on other things, that's great as well. If you want to check out the agency website, it's teambluedog.com. Not much going on there in terms of content, but if you want to get a hold of the keyword research automation sheet that I mentioned, it's there. That one does have you enter your email to get the sheet. Once you get the sheet, you're on the emailing list, and I am coming out with version 3 of the sheet sometime this year. We've been using it for a while in-house, and eventually it'll come out. And then if you're on that list, you'll get access to it.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for taking the time. And guys, if you're still watching, definitely hit that thumbs up button so that you can get YouTube to promote the channel for us. We'd greatly appreciate it. If you have any questions or comments, drop them below, and we'll see you in the next episode.